Recording is on.
Cool. Hey everyone, it is the 1st of December 2022, and this is UX Research Call number 8. It is a call that I'm really excited about because I've got Jan Mikula here. Please tell me if I pronounce your name incorrectly. And I've got Art Associates, and I'm basically inviting them to rip apart the UX Research Toolkit that I've been working on. And the UX Research Toolkit is, just to give a very brief introduction, the aim of it is to have a kit that the entire ecosystem can use where UX designers or researchers, they can jump in, grab from the toolkit and know how to conduct their research. So I've never had UX researchers' eyes on the toolkit, so I want to know what you guys have to say, what you guys have to think. But before we do that, Jan, please feel free to introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about what you do and your background, and we'll go again with Art after that.
Cool. So, hi everyone. Yeah, my name is Jan. I'm from Czech Republic, and right now I work for Swan, and specifically working on the mobile application as a product manager. And yeah, for long I've been interested in Bitcoin, and finally this year I joined Swan and have the pleasure on working on great Bitcoin projects and with great Bitcoiners, and it's awesome. And yeah, I'm really interested in research, and specifically I really kind of went down to rabbit hole about jobs to be done, which I think is kind of interesting, let's say, segment of the research. So yeah, I'm really curious about, general thoughts about research, how it should be done, and hopefully maybe I can participate in some things. So,
Go for it. And we have Stephen here as well. Stephen works alongside me in the Bitcoin design community. Hey, Stephen.
Hey, how's it going?
Cool. That's so nice of you to join.
I
They were
think
just introducing
I
themselves.
want to contribute here. I was just going more listening.
No worries. Art, feel free to introduce yourself.
Hey, beautiful people. My name is Art Assoyance. I'm based out of Calgary, Alberta, Canada, and I'm a UX researcher and strategist. I work with a boutique consultancy called PH1 Research. Our claim to fame is that UX research and strategy is a fundamental part of the product design, delivery, execution, analysis. And I'm but a humble practitioner of this magic art called UX user experience. And why I'm here is I am very passionate about the Bitcoin space in particular. We have worked in the Web3 space, and there's interesting developments, but my heart is in Bitcoin, and I think I have a lot to offer the community. So I want to be a better neighbor, be a better neighbor, be a better part of the community. And Mo, we were talking about this, and it's funny talking about community because Jan and I connected with Jan like literally a week ago, and it's that tiny of like that's how small the space is that I reached out to him like for a different reason, right? And here we are on this call, right?
Perfect.
That's special, So we're in the right place.
Perfect. Love it. Absolutely love it. We have Stephen and Christoph just listening in. They work together with me. We all work within the Bitcoin design community. But yeah, lovely having you guys here. So yeah, I've been working very kind of solo on this UX research toolkit, and I've never really had the opportunity to have the eyes of other researchers on it. Um, to be very honest with you, I started with it working as a normal Figma file to give you a little bit of background. And I thought, well, if I put all the tools in the Figma file, it's going to be easy and accessible for people. But now that I started using Notion, I've realized that within Notion, I can kind of like link up everything and give people a little bit more of a easily clickable, accessible way to access the different directions. So I've now moved over to Notion. I'm not like starting from scratch, but I'm kind of moving everything over to Notion, and I'm trying to understand how to move everything over to Notion. I'm noticing that I like FigJam as well for setting up files as opposed to Figma. Fig Jam is a lot more collaborative. If you want to do the sprints, you're both nodding your heads. So so yeah, I'll go ahead and share my screen. So just to give you a bit of a background, the goal of the UX Research Toolkit is kind of for all of these projects within the open source ecosystem to be able to just jump in, say like, oh, I want to do competitive research, oh, I want to do usability testing, and the goal is that they're able to jump into the kit, really just grab what they need, take it over to their team and just run with it. They have all the tools, they understand it really quickly. So everything is here in Notion at the moment. I'm going to share my screen. This is still on a Notion domain name, and the goal is to put it on a very specific domain name. So let me go ahead and share my screen here, and then I'll just walk you a little bit through my thought process with what I created here. Now, is my screen visible at the moment?
Yep.
Cool.
Yep.
So please, like, I'm not a a front end developer or anything. This is why I'm using Notion. It's accessible for me to design something and put something in there. But I kind of got the idea from the 4Ds to try and use the 4Ds of discover, define, design, and deliver, the 4Ds of the design process. And maybe, and this is taking a stab because I've never seen this done anywhere before. I just came up with this idea to kind of put each of the UX tools under each part of the UX process, but then again, still saying like, listen, these are not hard defined because you know you can still do usability testing in the discovery phase because you might already have an interface that you want to test and then you want to redesign. So I put, as you can see, usability testing here, and I put it here. So I took a stab at like trying an initial guidance towards like if the UX designer or researcher arrives here and they're in the discovery phase, they can think about possibly using any of these ones, or if think so. I'm playing around with this idea, so I'm curious what you guys think of it, or if you guys have another idea of how things can be grouped. It's more about guiding the person who's arriving at the toolkit to the right place very quickly. So yeah, love to hear your insights on that.
So I'm thinking, maybe give us the full sort of ecosystem tour. Like, let's zoom out, let's zoom in a few times just to get a sense of everything before
Yeah.
we start maybe offering ideas, nitpicking things without knowing the rest of the context, I think.
Yeah, shoot.
That's one. And then secondly, what I what I've been reflecting on as you're talking, it seems that in your mind, the end user of the toolkit is folks who do UX research, um, or who are UX designers. And I think that that's limiting uh, it's limiting because if anyone touches or breathes product, they should know these practices.
I love
And
it. Love
and
it.
if they don't, their work will fail.
Okay.
Um, Okay. And so when I think about the relevant user group, I think about anyone that is in the space of managing, designing, touching a product,
Mm-hmm.
whether or not they're super specialized
Mm-hmm.
as practitioners or not. Folks in management as well that we deal with a lot. And so, um, when like I almost want to maybe have a conversation very briefly about who are the um personas that we're solving for, right? And at which stage of their product development life cycle are they interacting with the toolkit? Because if we're building for someone who um, is completely unaware of what it means to put something in front of another human being,
Mm-hmm.
that's a different model and flow that we're going to have to take compared with assuming that this is a handoff toolkit to people who have that expertise. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and you're probably not going to like my answer. So UX research in this entire like Bitcoin ecosystem is like, to my feeling, still at its infancy stage. Although a lot of projects are very keen on, understanding their users more. So in terms of that persona, who the kit is being designed for, I definitely agree with you on, the kit should be basically across the board. So even if a project manager jumps on the kit, they understand how to use it. What the feel is in the ecosystem at the moment is a lot of teams have a basically like a solo UX designer, and that UX designer is expected to do the UX research, and they're expected to do everything because a lot of the teams don't have the budget to hire a separate UX researcher. So this UX designer should be able to just jump on, be able to use it. Maybe the project manager jump on, use it, take ideas. Where they are in their product management process, no idea. Different phases. Like some of the projects, like when we had the designathon, some of them were really starting from scratch, a Google document with a product idea, and some of them are like, another project like LNDG will already have a product and they're going to be just grabbing from the kit. So it needs to be accessible to these different types of groups. The one with the product and the one without the product. Yeah. Any thoughts, Jan?
Yeah, in my thinking, at least how I think about research, for me, it's exactly as you have it, like library of tools, and then you have different scenario because at least in my experience, it's different. For example, if you start building new whole product versus smaller feature
Mm-hmm.
versus you launch some feature and now you're kind of validating if it works and kind of planning, let's say, phase two. So you would probably kind of mix the tools a bit differently.
Mm-hmm.
Also, and another thought is like, or experience is it's also interesting kind of UX research versus, let's say, product manager like me doing the research. Because for example, if I'm doing new product, I would probably use the tools a little bit different mix of tools than, for example, the designer who's also working on the same product, where I'm more kind of, why people would use it, and the designer is sort of how they would use it, and basically it gives you kind of insight about whatever, like, specific UX designs that you would use. But for me, it's more like, oh, okay, what features we should put there, maybe for the MVP and stuff like that. So
Mm-hmm.
it's interesting. So in my head, is the best way how to kind of describe or prepare something like this. It's really kind of library with
Mm-hmm.
maybe a couple of scenarios how you can kind of mix the tools together. But it's more like, yeah, you have a bunch of tools, and for your given circumstances, you use the one that suits your situation.
So it's almost like there would be this like bucket, say this bucket full of these balls with all these different tools. And
Right.
then there's a little bit of extra guidance in terms of, well, are you working on a new product or are you working on an existing product? If you're working on a new product, we recommend that you use dot 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 dot. If you're working on an existing product, so it's funneling it a bit more. Okay, I got you. I got you. And that gives
Because
a little bit more direction.
yeah, exactly. Because one of the issue was like when we were kind of in my previous company where we were like really, yeah, let's start doing research, and it was like, so okay, let's start doing all those different exercises, but
Mhm,
we didn't really think about why we are doing it. Like, are we doing customer interviews because we want to improve this small feature, or is it more
mhm,
like, yeah, we are building new startup, and then even the customer interview itself, you would probably kind of structure it and ask different questions, and maybe you start kind of high level and do iteration, and right, like it's kind of a little bit different process. So yeah, like I think to have exactly library that describes and give you templates and everything, so you can do the exercise well,
mhm,
and then
mhm.
kind of separate guidance in which situation you would use what. I think in my mind that's super helpful. At least 3 years ago, for me it would be super helpful.
Brilliant. I really like this idea. I'm actually going to create a FigJam file because I'm curious in terms of you guys' experience, which kind of like UX research. I'm going to just share this here. It's literally just a blank document. I'm going to say anyone with link can edit. I'm kind of just having a bit of an idea to just jam in Figma. And the idea behind that would be we've created these two buckets. So you guys have said, look, let's give a little bit of guidance in terms of you have a new product, UX research tools. You have an existing product, UX research tools. Let's kind of just throw some tools in under each of those headings and see what we come up with. Here's the Figma file here. I'm just going to call this UX research toolkit structure. Yeah, and then we can just create two buckets. It's completely blank. Yeah, we can use this brainstorm one maybe. It's nice and simple. So new product and existing. So based on you guys' experience, I'd really love to know which tools, processes have worked well under each of these.
Well, another way of thinking about it and what's used in industry is these are generative or evaluative tools. Generative, you're looking to understand the market, you're looking to determine your hypothesized user groups, your personas, you're really mapping out initial pain points, your jobs to be done specifically and especially, as Jan mentioned. And on the evaluative or the go-to-market side of things, you're looking at getting people's eyes on something that is more fleshed out. So it's less of an iterative prototyping approach of testing. It's more of a let's get a Likert scale assessment. Let's use the system usability scale. Let's or the single ease use question. It's getting a number of people to vote on prioritizations of things, right? Does this work? Does this not, right? I think the philosophy just differs. On the one hand, you want to build and scope out. On the other one, you want to zoom down and get a solution, right?
Yeah, yeah. So build and scope out versus ship out a solution. Yeah, so we can, let me just do this here. I will call this build, scope out. And we can
Because
call,
again, like if something doesn't exist yet, if somebody's in the ideation phase of a product or a service, they need to go broad and they need to like siphon a lot of information and come out with like a big set of ideas, right?
yeah.
That they can then hone in on. Whereas when you're evaluating, and I've done work as a program evaluator and in UX research, product research, you're trying to come in, you're trying to solution something, you're trying to come up with a concrete direction, so to speak.
Okay, let's go jam in Figma. And like, just feel free. I mean, we can do this for like maybe 5 minutes. Maybe just like everyone just grab like a sticker and then in your experience, put it under the correct, like, if you feel competitive research is better in building and scoping out, just pop a note in there, right, in competitive research. So yeah, we can just jam in here for about 5 minutes. Really.
Jan, what are your thoughts, dude? What have you been thinking?
Asking me? Yeah, like I think about it. It's for me. It's almost like a matrix. That exactly. One thing is kind of sort of this double diamond idea, right? Like it's like you start kind of generative research, and then you kind
Mhm,
of moving down to some solution. That's
mhm,
let's say one axis, but the other axis is kind of exactly more like is it a product or just small feature? Because even you can start with generative research for a product and then kind of closing down for the MVP and kind of trying to figure out what the MVP looks like, which is kind of more high level. And then you can also have, but even for small feature for existing product, you can start kind of generative research, checking the competitors, what they are doing,
Mm-hmm.
doing a
Mm-hmm.
bunch of research, and then basically, okay, I have some solution. I'm start testing it. I'm start evaluating which exact solution that I have in mind is working or not. So yeah, if you, it's like every research has kind of two phases.
Mm-hmm.
Also, it's a little bit different in terms of if it's a whole product or
Mm-hmm.
just small feature.
Yeah, specific. And also the thing I'd like to also just to mention is I'd like to keep things lean because quite often yeah, you're smiling, Art, because quite often these projects they don't have a defined time frame with conducting the UX research. It's very, very agile. So that's also something to bear in mind is it can be it's jumping in at any time. So I want to really keep things as lean as possible and really only be suggesting. I don't want to suggest like 10 things because there's 10 things available. I really want to be suggesting the ones that are good, efficient, helpful, and implementable, into the process.
I agree,
Yeah.
and I think this how now the columns are. I think it's better than kind of new product versus existing product, because I think um, if you are kind of differentiating the new product versus new feature, I think you are sometimes using sort of similar research methods, but you simply focus on different things, right? Like when you do competitive research, you are doing both for for new product and new feature, but the for the competitive research for a feature is focused on the small things, right? But it's kind of the same process, just the deliverable is more targeted to this specific thing, right? So I think this how Art suggested is actually a better way how to kind of classify those uh, tools.
Christoph, you jumped in. Would you like to chime in?
Yeah, hey all. Yeah, it's just too interesting of a conversation, and I got my other task out of the way, updating a README file on the GitHub repo.
Yeah, these guys
Super
are
fun.
great. These guys are great. Chime in. Chime in.
Yeah, yeah. So I share the Markdown file, which I keep referring to that one, and I think the larger point here is a really interesting one: is what to do at which point. And even that is just a huge help, I think, for project, because we've seen they come in and like, hey, designer, like, what are we gonna do? Like, what do we even need? And just figuring that out is helpful, and then having a really basic process that you can take them through. So in that collaboration document that I just shared down there, in that one, I try to just break it down into like 6 common scenarios. A project shows up and they have nothing and they want a good design process, or they just want a logo, or they have a product and they're not happy with it or so, or they want a redesign. And then just some tips on how to. I think there's a lot more that can be done, and a more kind of, you can fill in methods that are appropriate maybe for each situation or so. And then it becomes like just matching up, what situation are we in? What should we do? How should we do it? So I think maybe something like that helps as well, because I think Mo, we talked about it before. You see people writing articles about, I hate personas, they never work, and the other person writes, I love personas, they always work. And it's simply because they've just had a lot of different experience with different
Yeah.
people and companies and projects, and maybe they just didn't use it the right way, or the people they worked with didn't click with it, or somehow like all these things are kind of useful. It's just
And
knowing what to do at what time is like half the battle here.
and just keeping it lean, but also is that we're gonna be using this research toolkit within the community on different projects, and then the goal would be to say, hey, we used jobs to be done on BTC Pay. Look, this is what we came up with using jobs to be done. So we want to keep it lean, and it's also interesting to understand is that the adoption. This is an adoption within an adoption. Is that the adoption of using UX research within all these little teams? It's at its complete infancy. So it's needing to really feel very approachable, the UX research toolkit. Not like, hey, if I jump in, okay, let me find my feet. Like I need to consult with someone to find my direction. It needs to feel friendly, usable, approachable. Yeah.
I have a question for you guys. Where do you think that line is where people can just kind of do it on their own with good instructions, versus you really need someone with experience to navigate the process.
I have no idea.
It depends, like all good design
Yeah.
answers.
It, it it's interesting because if you're working on a smaller project, it's likely that you can give somebody a good set of instructions and they could follow them and they could do an okay job. Where this practice, where you I think you need more expertise and years in the industry is if you're working with large amounts of data. If you're consolidating across, let's say, 10, 20 interviews, there's a product sense that you develop of how to navigate qualitative synthesis, or working with like larger data sets with quantitative, or mixing quantitative and qualitative research together into making an argument for a certain direction, right? The other bit is strategy. Like, there's a big difference between, coming to Jan with years of experience and saying, here's my context, and he can leverage his skill set and say, okay, strategically, this is how I would approach it, right? And he probably will cut 5 months off of a project because he's experienced those things in life. Whereas somebody that's just starting off, there's going to be a lot more like spinning wheels, right? A lot more waste, a lot of doing uh, uh, running through practices, not because they're efficient, but because they're best practice, right?
Yeah.
Um, so uh, I think the good news for the community is when we design this toolkit, it will be usable and it will
Yeah.
make impact. The better news is that there are senseis within the community that you can come and consult with, like Mo, for example, like Jan and others, um, who can provide the strategy that's required, kind of like a Lego assembler in a sense. Use this piece, use this piece, use this piece. Um, that will create the largest amount of impact in the shortest amount of time.
You touched on something really important, because when we were interviewing the users of the Bitcoin Design Guide, one of the UX designers who was doing UX research, he said, well, look, I'm constantly going back to the Bitcoin Design Guide to look for research so I can prove my case to the team if I want a specific feature to be built out, or if I want a specific this to be built out. And she was like, this is what I need from the Bitcoin Design Guide. Like, I want that data to bring my case forward. So I feel like even, communication as a UX designer is a huge thing. Like, you have to be able to bring your case forward in a good way. But I think that this, with what Christoph shared, creating this playbook, guiding these projects who are going in these, maybe we can say loosely defined, two different buckets, and kind of maybe see, maybe we can start brainstorming what goes under those buckets, and then the next step might be to writing that up into this, what you would call what would we call it, Bitcoin design, no, UX design, um, research playbook. Could we call it that?
I mean, that could be just your research kit, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
The reason why the collaboration document is the way it is, because those were actual from experience. That's just the things that projects needed, and that creates that doesn't, a theoretical foundation is good, but it's great if you have a practical foundation that's based on actual needs in the community. So maybe there's a way that this UX research kit can also kind of describe common project scenarios specific to the Bitcoin open source ecosystem.
Yeah, it's so useful having you guys here. I wouldn't have, you always can have your own perspective on something, but then you can always get other people's insights. And I would have never thought about it the way that you guys have now just brought it forward. So yeah, thank you for that approach already. But shall we kind of like try to bucket stuff already? I'm very curious in terms of your personal experience having worked on projects like, you know building a new product from scratch. We have an idea, we're building it from the ground up. What are the tools that they're going to be using at that stage? And then on the other end of the scale, we already have a product and we're bringing it to the market, or redesigning it and bringing it to the market again. What are the tools that can really help us there? And then keeping it lean, because it's ideally the tool would be very agile. I know not all of the UX research tools are agile, but ideally the tool would be very agile, that you can just use it, jump in, shoot out some feedback to the team, and keep on going. It doesn't have to have 3 different boxes fit together before it's implementable or actionable. So I've created this Fig Jam. I'll just share this Fig Jam document here. I'm very curious what you guys are going to write under each heading. Oh, I've already shared it, but I'll share it again. Feel free to. Oh, you guys are just already writing. Jeez, you've been writing while we've been talking. Good job. All right. Feel free to write in each of these boxes. Nice. Yeah, let's just bang on with this for about 5 minutes, or until everyone's ready. Um, I know we're going to get a jobs to be done from Jan in one of these as well, if it's not already there.
Yeah, basically, for me, the customer interviews is basically the way how you sort of identify or gonna gather the jobs to be done. Then there would be sort of brainstorming session, which I don't know how I would call it, and if to have it like separate thing, it's more like kind of going through and trying to synthesize and find patterns. But yeah, like maybe maybe put it this way.
I have a very controversial opinion. That is about the philosophy of research, where customer interviews, surveys, analytics are not research methods. Those are data capture methods, right? But that's neither here nor there, and it should never be mentioned ever again.
So is it more like sort of language thing, or is there some kind of deeper philosophy behind this statement?
There is deeper philosophy. It's that like to say competitive research means something really specific. To say customer interview means nothing specific. It just means that you're having a conversation with a customer, where you could be doing jobs to be done, you could be doing mental model research, you could be doing persona research,
Right.
but that could all be within a customer interview. You see what I'm saying?
So basically, you are saying, is it what you are saying that customer interviews is kind of broader term? It could mean
Correct.
many specific different types of research techniques.
Exactly. It's like somebody saying, well, let's use qual. And you're like, what like what are you saying, man? Qual is like gigantic. What are we doing? That's what I mean.
Something that I should also ask for some help on as well. And for me, making affinity diagrams is not a UX research process or tool. It's a data sorting technique. But what we have a lot with these open source projects, and Christoph added this one in over here, is that these open source projects are having user feedback come in often from 4 or 5 different sources. They're not at that stage where they're having that feedback come in from one channel source. And this is a problem, because they're struggling with, how do we sort this data and how do we draw conclusions from this data? And that's the one that Christoph added. It's a really big one. with the with projects within the community. They have data, they don't know how to
Love it.
sort it, they don't know what to do with it, and it's coming in from all sorts of different channels. And I suggest, like, okay, affinity diagram, but yeah, sometimes there's so much of data to sort through that it's like, yeah, it's a really mammoth task. So I'm curious what you guys suggest in terms of sorting through data from like 4 different sources.
Yeah, I don't have kind of specific, let's say, ideas how to deal with it, but my thoughts are like kind of the discussion between data driven and data informed. I'm definitely way more on the data informed side. That it's like, okay, I have a bunch of dashboards from different sources, I'm checking it, but it's not like that, like maybe like Facebook, that whenever I ship something, I just checking those 3 4 5 metrics, and if it's, if it's slightly improved, okay, I will ship it to production. If it's not, I will scratch that experiment and go back. For me, it's more like, yeah, like exactly starting from the qualitative side, really talking to customers, what is their real life struggle, and
Mm-hmm,
maybe kind of checking the different sources and
mm-hmm,
basically see, okay, is there some true, is it on kind of bigger scale?
mm-hmm,
But obviously it's very subjective, and but I think that's how it is, like kind of pretend that if you have lots of data, it's suddenly objective. I don't think so. It's more like, okay, yeah, it's great to have all those data, but you shouldn't be overwhelmed, and you shouldn't kind of say, yeah, this is ultimate true, and just look at the,
mm-hmm.
chart or something. So that's kind of my view on it.
So if I understand correctly, then let's say there's this project that has all of these secondary sources of data, like they have in their GitHub, they have in their Twitter, in their Telegram channel. So what you're saying, Jan, is okay, it's great to have that, but maybe the product has changed since then. So you can collect that data, but it's might be better to say, look, let's just do user interviews or usability testing instead.
Yeah, I give you example, right? Like for example, at Swan, right? Like we are trying to push people to withdraw to their hardware wallet, and let's say that there are options that they can add their XPub, or some people actually doing every time they're withdrawing, they pasting different address. And sure, you can start with the analytics data and can see, how many people have wallets, how often they are adding them. But if you just look at the data, basically it could be very misleading. But if you start with the research, actually one guy told me, yeah, like I don't trust you guys with the XPub because maybe not on purpose, but maybe you are, keeping it somewhere, and then it could be leak, and that it could cause the troubles, and you would never find this insight from the data. So what I could do, like I can have the user interview, find this insight, and then basically checking the data and see, hey, so how many people are generating the address every time, and basically, and then okay, I see some validity in the data as well. But
Mm-hmm.
again, I need to start with a qualitative research, because otherwise, like it doesn't work the other way. Like you might have some hints, but very often it's very misleading.
Got you. Got you.
I have a meta insight that came from Jan's observation just now, and it's that in any activity that requires a large deal of data analysis and siphoning and playfulness, you need a data owner.
Mm,
Okay, Jan
Mm.
is the data owner in that particular case because he could triangulate between those different data sources and come to a
Mm.
mhm,
Nice.
mhm,
um, with secondary research or data sorting, you need one person to own that task,
mhm,
um, and or delegate it. Otherwise, it becomes soup.
mhm, mhm. Yeah. And that triangulation of comparing, like looking for those links in the different, tools is something that I think maybe it might be interesting to include that in the a little bit of education about that in the UX research toolkit. Like, hey, because this is a solo person we're ideally talking to, and we're going to be like, okay, let's look for the links. This is how we guide you to look for the links. You've done your user interviews. Go back to your data and see if you can find the connection. So it's guiding them to that triangulation approach, but in a very like loose, easygoing kind of way. because it's new. Like we're at the education stage of this, So, but I will check now. In here, let's see. You guys have put a lot of stuff.
Yashraj just had a request. He wrote, Art, can you please repeat what you just said? I don't know which part that was.
I think I only said one interesting idea, which was that if you're working with large amounts of data from different sources, for example, analytics, customer success feedback that's siphoned through the success team, UX research, product research, there should be one person that is ultimately responsible for manipulating and working with the data and coming up with insights around the collective period.
One person kind of connecting the dots. Like there's this like red light flashing here after doing the user interviews. Oh, I see that same red light flashing in the secondary data which we've collected from Telegram or Discord or GitHub.
Correct.
So that's
And
that person standing in the
and
middle. Yeah.
that person is either then also the one that is actively siphoning the information, or they are delegating people to provide relevant, already filtered information to them at certain points in time. Like once a week, customer success needs to send me the top 3 issues, the top 3 praises.
Mm,
You
mm.
know, once a week, the social media team needs to send me the top 3 complaints, top 3 compliments. Does that make sense?
Makes sense. Christoph has a question.
I have a question about that. I've seen some UX researchers, and I found that they're always very curious people, and they love to learn, so they spend all of their time learning. So it's like 90% learning and 10% making a PDF and sending it to someone.
Mm-hmm.
Where I feel like it's healthier if there's like 50% learning and then 50% of taking those learnings and ensuring they flow into other people's brains and
Mm.
actually get applied through the process. So if you're recommending that there's one person who kind of just brings it all together, then what are good ways that this person can then make sure that this kind of marinates into the project, other people's brains, and actually gets applied.
I think this is the most important questions because yeah, like I still don't know what's the best way how to communicate the research. Uh, I started exactly with like long PDF that nobody read from kind of presentation, but ultimately, there are ideas that basically yeah, like the research should be part of the kind of building team, that it should be kind of within the team itself because then it will kind of naturally flow. But like every organization is a little bit different, and sometimes you don't have capacity to do everything. So but I think this is the most important thing, because we can have great research techniques, but if we are not able to communicate what we found in impactful way, then it was for nothing, right? So
And that's a question I'm going to dive in deeper to also for Art as well. How are you finding, same question again, a successful method of communicating it back to the project? Is it like something that I'll give you something really practical. Something that I do is I take a screenshot of the user interface with the feedback directly from the usability test, and I will provide direct quotes and then tag the different sections of the interface that that quote is referring to. And I'll basically show that to the team. And then I'll say the project, I'll say, how might we solve the, I don't know, start button or send button not being understandable to users? So, how is it for you guys that you're finding it successfully communicated back to the project?
let me maybe tell you this thing. For me, it's like sort of library of different tips and tricks, and you use it in different situations because probably you very differently communicate, for example, some research findings to the developer who is building this new feature, versus if you are doing some kind of broader research about new product and then you need to communicate it to CEO, right? Like you would probably use completely different ways, and like sometimes the developers simply maybe invited them to some customer interviews, maybe have a really direct call with them, with the CEO who is super busy, all the time distracted. I don't know, maybe presentation because he's used to presentation, but it's so kind of personal, and you need to always adjust. That's kind of my feeling. So again, for me, it's more like, hey, it should be sort of library of tips, and maybe
Mm-hmm.
common scenarios, sort of stakeholders versus developers versus fellow designers, and maybe we will find something there. Again, I totally agree it should be lean, but yeah, I don't think there is kind of one magic solution that works every time.
No. And you, same question as you, Art?
I'm very biased because I work in a consultancy. I don't work in house. So the people
Mm-hmm.
that we work with are very motivated to
Mm-hmm.
act on and absorb the things that we share. Um, However, there are common data communication practices like uh, use as few words as possible to communicate what you're trying to communicate. No more than uh, X amount of words per slide. Share videos or quotes of participants. That tends to work quite well. If you can if you can slap a number on something,
Yeah.
especially compare that to baseline, that's usually sexy and people like that, especially in more VP senior leadership positions. um, I do want to say though, I feel like we're diverging.
Yeah,
um,
that's what I was going to say. I was going to basically just go right back to the UX Research Toolkit and come right back to the Figma file. So can we, if we can just have a look, because we've got 10 minutes left. If I look at these kind of, so we've got under build and scope out, competitive research, stakeholder interviews. Okay, how about we do a little bit of, I'm going to just remove this one here. So in the ship out solution, we have 4 here, and in the build and scope out, we have 1, 2, 3. Are there any duplications over here? I'm just trying to see if there's, first let's check if there's any duplications. Um, okay.
I don't think there are duplications.
No, there are none. Everything is completely different. Okay. If you had 3 votes, so feel free to just use the stamp tool because I'm curious if we're getting some duplications. Just use the stamp tool, and everyone gets 3 votes in build and scope out, and everyone gets 3 votes in ship out solution. Just go ahead and stamp the ones where you're like, yeah, I really think this is a good one. So go ahead. I know that's tricky to ask, but go ahead and stamp out the ones that you're like, these are the ones that are really this is.
Yeah, I just put in a very basic researcher funnel here, which is very poorly written, but I think that's also something. Uh, I think with the toolkit, you kind of have to figure out who you're serving there. If you want to allow, like, for example, Bitcoin meetups are great for research. You can just go ask a bunch of people, like, which wallet do you use? Tell me about it. Anyone can do that, right? You don't have to be a researcher. It's just asking some questions. If you want to provide that type of enable more that type of research, it's very different than what you guys are using with a super professional and like a big company environment at a super high level. That's where you want that rich toolbox. It's not IKEA. You're going to the home improvement store and you're picking out exactly which screw you're going to use for whatever you came up with. Yeah.
I agree with you, Christoph. Like I think this is more of, I want this to be more of an IKEA than it is like a home hardware.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because if somebody is looking to, okay, in full transparency, if somebody is interested enough to get into the weeds of the practice, like the UX, uh, the reops community has already built out like a set of tools, the research operations community, and there's other UX research communities that you could leverage. What we want to do is we want to create the minimum viable service for somebody in our space to be able to come leverage this and make an impact, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
And that's you, Mo. You started off with this idea of lean, right? Lean, 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 and I think that's a philosophy we have to keep.
100%, 100%. That we are all on the same page. So has everyone finished voting here? Because I've finished voting on the build and scope out. I'm gonna go ahead and vote on
I
these.
voted on both.
You voted on both. I do like the heuristic valuation. Yep, definitely moderated usability tests. Well, what do you mean by leverage analytics? So are you talking about the analytics, the click rates, and that kind of thing on the user interface?
Correct. Yeah. So that's just another form of data capture.
Yeah, yeah, that's a tricky one. I'll explain more why just now. A lot of the open source projects, they don't collect data. It's against principles, ethics within the projects. So yeah, they don't allow. There's no data collection in these projects. Like I know they're not allowed to collect click rates. It's not allowed.
Mhm.
It's
Yeah,
basically
it's not that allowed. It's a philosophy. It's a
yeah,
design principle.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's just yeah. So has everyone finished voting? Because then we can pretty much just like pull out the ones that are kind of shining through here. Has everyone finished voting? Yeah.
Yes.
Cool. So I'm just gonna grab copies here. So you guys, competitive research is definitely getting a clear yes.
And Christoph, I'd say like data sorting and secondary research is vital. It just I don't think like a newbie could really pick that up and and run with it immediately.
Totally. This is more of when a team is already there and they're trying to become a bit more structured about things. And
I
then they
totally agree.
realize it's not really possible because it's not numbers, it's actual
Mhm.
communication.
I mean, we could do a little write up about that. That wouldn't be that hard, I think.
But it might actually be helpful to not to say that this is not a numbers thing. You as a team, so one thing that I've done before is I just continuously pay attention to conversations and then use that intake to guide design without doing any type of write up or so. But it just kind of informs. And then the other part of it is also if you're actually doing a good job, like people will complain about something and you're going to address it, and then that those complaints go away. So you're paying attention to the silence, the things that people don't say anymore, and there are no numbers on that, right? So just maybe explaining the soft parts of how to think about this and how to go about it. So it kind of validates them that someone can say like, this is actual work reading through all of this stuff, and not like, like Mo said, sometimes people they look for validation of how they think about things when maybe other people in their team or so they're not quite set
We've
yet.
done,
So.
I think, already coming to sort of, I wouldn't say these are fixed conclusions, but we have now under build and scope out, we have competitive research, user journey mapping, which I've just seen being used in a project in Get Albi. Jakob did a really good one. Jobs to be done, which we can learn more about from Jan. And we have heuristic evaluation, big fan of heuristic evaluation, moderated usability tests, big fan on that. The leverage analytics, I'd like to learn more about from Art. So it definitely feels like we've really kind of found something a little bit lean to run with right now. It feels very lean, at least with regards to these two suggestions. Um, and yeah, I mean, next steps, I guess, for me would be to basically go back into the UX research toolkit, rebuild out that initial, design of look, are you building and scoping out, or are you shipping the product to market? Rebuild that out, put these under headings under each of them, and then put any work that I've done under each of these. And then, Jan, if you're open to doing educational call with us on jobs to be done, I would absolutely love that because I am not a jobs to be done specialist. I don't know if you've done it as well, Art, but I've heard its song being sang many, many times, and I'd like to learn more about it.
Yeah, sure. I can prepare like sort of quick presentation, and then maybe we can have kind of general discussion how we can apply it, and so those kind of things. So more kind of discussion rather than just me been talking. So yeah, I can prepare for the next call.
Yeah.
There's also a good video about it, Mo, you could watch from Clayton Christensen or whatever his name was called. He has some good video where he just explains it in like 10, 15 minutes or so.
Yeah, send the link, Christoph. I don't know, I'm not familiar with that one, but yeah, for sure. And then we can basically use like Jan's educational section, build out the jobs to be done in the toolkit, kind of, just work like that a bit. And then yeah, I mean, this has been really, really helpful from both of you. And thank you sincerely for your time, your insights, your time, your insights, your industry knowledge, whatever, dot, 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 dot. And yeah, I'm really keen on getting another call with you guys if you're open to it. I love it when my work is ripped apart because I just learn more. I just wanna make it better. I don't wanna.
In all transparency, we haven't had a chance to rip anything apart, so
Yeah,
I'm eagerly awaiting that moment.
it's already ripped apart. Like I've shown it to you and it's ripped apart, literally. So yeah, I think the next step for me, I'll basically scope out, start adding stuff into those ones that we've kind of narrowed down. I'll start adding it into the toolkit. I'll start working on that, and we can just jump on another call and keep on going.
Let's do it.
Cool, sounds good. And by the way, for me, it's super useful kind of to talk with other people, hearing the opinions. That's awesome. So thanks for organizing this.
100%, Jan. I'm totally in the same boat. It's so lovely to just like actually talk with other humans and educate and ask questions. This is fun.
It's like, yeah, and also have your ideas challenged as well, because I think as UX researchers, we mostly, at least, it's quite a solo kind of, at least for me, it feels like quite a solo job. So just to be able to get on the space and be researchers together, it's amazing. I love it. Yeah. So I'm going to stop the recording because otherwise I will lose the recording.